I'm gonna run and get some glasses.
So we don't have we need 13 to start, right?
Well, yeah, I would think, right?
So.
Retirement Board, Tom Lopez. We are joined by Kathy Riley from Siegel Actuary to the Retirement Board. We're joined by Steve Curley, our comptroller. The first thing that I would like to do is ask the group's permission to invite school committee member Chris Bresky to join us. As I think you all know, Mr. Bresky's been incredibly helpful in helping us understand the different numbers before us. So any discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Madam Clerk, if you could please promote Mr. Bresky to be a panelist. I see we've been joined by our CFO, Maureen Lemieux. And if there are others who have signed on in the last minute who I've missed, I apologize. But I think in the interest of time, we should get going here. So first of all, welcome. Thank you all for joining for this really important conversation this morning. The first item before us is number 136-23, request to increase the retiree COLA base. This is the Retirement Board requesting that the City Council approve an increase to the retiree cost of living adjustment base from $12,000 currently to $13,000 in fiscal year 24, to $14,000 in fiscal year 25, to $15,000 in fiscal year 26. And for this to begin to be effective, the first increase as of July 1st of this year. So the first thing I want to do is hand it over to Chair of the Retirement Board, Tom Lopez, to start us off. My intention after that is to give it over to Ms. Lemieux to say something, and then over to President Albright. So Mr. Lopez, welcome. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here this morning, and we'd love to hear from you.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good morning to everybody here. So obviously, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of documents, a lot of numbers discussed about this. I'm just going to try to simplify this from the perspective of the Retirement Board and what's in front of the council today. Just to give a brief background of our system, there's 104 retirement systems in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We are one of 6 communities out of the 104 that still has a base of $12,000. Some of our neighboring communities are approaching $20,000 to $21,000. We've had 2 attempts in recent years. The most recent one was in 2018 to increase the COLA base to 13,000. The city council didn't even make it out of the finance committee meeting at that point in time. Since 2018, there has been no attempt to increase the COLA base. The more focus has been on getting the system fully funded. Currently, right now, our system's 85th as far as funding in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts out of the 104 systems. That's our funding percentage. When I first got on the board around 2017, 18, it was around 51, 52%, approximately 60% funded now. That does not account for the losses that we had in the market last year. Those numbers haven't been finalized yet. We'll hear from Kathy Riley, hopefully in May, to get a final number where we are with that. I am hoping we're still above the 60%. That being said, as I've said before, we are one of 6 communities at 12,000. And at a time where inflation rate is at 6.7% and climbing, the economy is slowing, prices have increased dramatically. And I don't need to explain that to anybody in this room, how prices have increased. Our most vulnerable population is suffering most, which is our retirees. They have had no COLA increase, and they've had to absorb a lot of these increases without any benefit of an increase in their COLA base. And now with the decision of the mayor to unilaterally eliminate the Part B supplement, there's another financial loss that our retirees are suffering. So really what's in front of you is a decision of the council to finally move forward in a direction to help provide some relief for our retirees. So everybody is aware of how these different proposals have come forward. I can repeat them briefly, and I'll be more than happy to. In our March meeting, which we normally do every year, we have our public hearing where we set our COLA base percentage, which is allowed up to 3% by law. Historically, the Newton Retirement Board has always given the 3%. We've never, not in my history, we've gone below that. But as all of you know, we were unsuccessful in increasing the actual base from 12,000. So after the override failed, the mayor presented her proposal. As what we call the working group, as it presented another proposal, which is comprised of city councilors and school committee members. They proposed a different funding schedule. The retirement board provided both groups an opportunity to present themselves at the March meeting. The retirement board held a special meeting April 6th with our actuary, Kathy Riley, who joins us today, will be available to answer any questions. And we were faced with a decision. The decision was regardless of what we decided to do as far as a funding schedule, the year that we were going to have the system funded was going to have to be pushed out to 2031 because of just the financial losses. Regardless of a COLA base increase, regardless of change, we were going to have to move this out 1 year. So the decision to move forward with the COLA base increase, changing the funding schedule to 2032, which actually provides the resources, the finances in August of 31, was the decision, a unanimous decision by the retirement board at its April 6th meeting. So that's what's in front of you right now. And I know that there have been different meetings, different presentations by different groups. You've debated, you've seen a lot of worksheets going back and forth from Kathy Riley, from our comptroller, from the retirement board. That is really what's in front of you today. The retirement board has voted. We've through the process, we've now forwarded to the council for their deliberation and decision on what they want to do. Do they want to support it? Do they not? Is really now what's in your hands. So that just gives you a brief synopsis of where we're at. The retirement board is prepared to meet at its regular meeting and will follow through on what the council's decision is. So really, I mean, just to try to simplify it from our approach, we think it's long overdue. It's time. Our retirees have been suffering. They need it. Our most vulnerable population is in need of some relief. And comparably, we're one of the most wealthiest communities in the Commonwealth, and we're one of 6 that are still at 12,000. So that's really all I have. I'll be here to answer questions as much as I can. As I said, Kathy Riley is here, from Siegel Associates, our actuary, who'll be able to assist you if you have any financial questions. So I look forward to hopefully participating and just following through and see what the committee decides.
Thank you very much. I want to turn it over to CFO Lemieux to comment, and then over to President Albright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to all of you on behalf of the mayor and the administration. As I think you all realize, the FY24 budget that you have before you has many complicated, interconnecting pieces and is likened to a Rubik's Cube. Monday night, the mayor enumerated many actions that we have requested of you as a council, or have taken if they are within our control, as we have put forth what we believe is a viable, sustainable, and achievable plan. As you all know, 6 weeks ago, the operating override failed. That would have provided $4.5 million in operating funds to NPS and would have provided the funding for the Horace Mann addition and renovation. When we met with most of you following that vote, overwhelmingly, you told us that you were disappointed that we no longer had a pathway forward for the Horace Mann community. And as you know, the mayor shared that sentiment. In the past 6 weeks, we have worked tirelessly to craft a budget that would provide the funding to move so many of our initiatives forward. A budget that has several initiatives and strategies embedded in it. Perhaps one of the most important strategies is the request that is in this particular docket item. In February, the Retirement Board forwarded a recommendation to the mayor to accept the statute that allowed retirement boards to approve a 5% increase as a COLA for fiscal year 23 for our retirees. That would have allowed up to $240 increase in pensions to our retirees just for this year. Beginning in 2024, our retirees would have gone back to their typical 3% on the first $12,000 of pensions, or $360 per year. As we all know, as Tom just said, all but 6 of the 104 pension systems across the Commonwealth have approved measures to increase the base on which retiree COLAs are calculated to something higher than 12%. There is no question that Newton lags behind when it comes to our retiree COLAs. Concurrently, we knew that as a result of market fluctuations in 2022, we had investment losses that even with a 9% annual increase in our pension appropriation, we would not be able to keep our 2030 full funding target. In plain words, our full funding schedule by necessity would have to move to 2031. We thought long and hard about what was in the best interest of our retirees, our residents, our pension system, and the financial health of the city. In the end, we concluded that instead of supporting the one-time 5% COLA for this year, we would go to the Retirement Board and ask to increase the COLA base by $1,000 per year over each of the next 3 years. This, we knew, was more beneficial to our retirees in the long term over the one-time 5% COLA. The cumulative effect of the 5% COLA over a 20-year period for each retiree, would be a total of $4,800, while increasing the COLA base by $1,000 per year for each of the next 3 years would have a cumulative effect over that same 20-year period of a total of more than $17,000. However, we also know that this is the more expensive option. This option will add more than $25 million to the overall unfunded liability. As a result of the analysis that we did, as well as consultation with Kathy Ryler, Kathy Riley, our actuary, who is, of course, here this morning with us, in consultation with our financial advisor and bond strategist, Cinder McNerney from Hilltop Securities, we were able to formulate a request that we believe will set us on a pathway forward with a viable, sustainable, attainable financial plan to ensure that we reach full funding of our pension system by August of 2031, while creating the financial flexibility to attain several of our other important goals. Therefore, on March 28th, Mayor Fuller went to the Retirement Board meeting with 2 requests. The first was to vote to increase the base on which the COLA was applied by $1,000 per year in each of the next 3 years. And the second was to extend the full funding schedule by 1 more year. Requesting a 1-year extension of the full funding schedule allows the city to make its last payment toward full funding in August of 2031, while allowing the city to reduce the increase in the pension appropriation a full 3 percentage points, from an annual 9.6% increase to a 6.6% increase. What does this mean? It means that over the next 7 years, we will have a cumulative total of approximately $44 million that we will be able to utilize to close our gap, so that we can ensure that we will be able to provide the Newton Public Schools and all of our city departments with the resources they need, while ensuring that we are addressing our long-term liabilities. It also allows us to have the bonding capacity to move forward with the Horace Mann ad reno. I know many people have proposed many variations to this plan. I know that some people do not think the COLA is worth it. But keep in mind, the COLA will give our retirees more than $17,000 over the next 20 years. I know that some people wanted to extend the full funding schedule out even further. But again, please keep in mind that this plan will enable us to utilize $44 million over the next 7 years to attain many goals, while maintaining our financial strength and stability. And I know there will be substantial discussion here this morning. Although your vote is only on the COLA as proposed, the change in the funding schedule and the Horace Mann ad reno are very much dependent on what you all choose to do. So I ask that you support this docket item and all of the important aspects that go along with it. Thank you.
Thank you. President Albright, over to you. And then after that, I think we're gonna work to really seek to understand what is before us, and we're gonna have lots of opportunity for questions. So President Albright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to start by saying that this has been one of the most difficult docket items that I've dealt with during my time on the council. The consequences are of huge importance. The time is rushed, and the details have been poorly understood. That being said, I hope by this meeting we're shedding light on the problem. The most important thing that I want to say is that our pension obligation is a legal obligation and a moral obligation, and it must be met. Secondly, I want to clearly say that we are grateful to our retirees for the service they've given our city. We understand how difficult retirement can be on a fixed income during the times of great inflation. The third thing I want to say is that our city is having difficulty providing the services on both the city side and the schools side, especially in the face of the failed override. We want to fund our pension obligation as fast as we can, because we know that would be the least expensive way to do it. On the other hand, we also want to provide the services our residents expect. The most frequently stated reason for why people move to Newton is for our schools and our proximity to Boston. The schools are the jewels in our crown. We must do whatever is possible to maintain excellent schools. Some communities started funding their pension obligations in 2009. In Newton, we were very late to the party, with a plan in 2014 and first payments in 2015. Our mayor played a significant role in getting this plan developed and off the ground. It's now clear to most that we can't afford to both pay down our obligation with an increase of 9.6% growth every year and still have the city we have all come to know and love. As Mr. Lopez stated, the mayor and the council both made presentations to the board, and the board in turn presented an option with a 6.6% rate of growth with an increase of COLA over 3 years. As we heard today, we're only one of 6 cities that are still paying COLA at a base of $12,000. However, as our counselors pointed out at our meeting with the board back in March, the rate of growth of revenue is only 3.5%. We remain concerned that a 6.6% rate of growth rate to our pension obligation is still too fast and crowds out our ability to provide the school and city services our students and residents need and expect. We appreciate the proposal to reduce the rate of growth to 6.6%, but I would respectfully like to move that we ask the retirement board if they would consider reducing the rate of growth to 5%, possibly with 2 more increases of COLA over the 10-year period until the pension is fully funded in 2033. We all need to understand better what this COLA increase would mean to both retirees and the city. There's been confusion on this point. As you heard in Ms. Lemieux's speech, she's talking about a $17,000 impact over 20 years. What I impact of the COLA is for the retirees and for the city. The things we need on the city side are being crowded out by the pension growth. Our nice to haves, these are not nice to haves, these are musts to maintain our infrastructure, our roads, fields, buildings, sidewalks, to provide the services to our populations in need, those making less than 50% of AMI and our seniors. But last but not least, we need to make sure that our schools remain the jewel in the crown. So what is the balance between funding our pension and providing excellent city services? We need to take the time to figure this out. What is the real impact of COLA? What is the impact of reducing the rate of growth? I know there's fear of maintaining our AAA bond rating. There are at least 2 AAA communities that have 2033 as an end date, Hingham and Needham. And that's what I think the 5% rate of growth is, as I understand it, would mean a 2033 end date for our pension being fully funded. I put this motion on the floor to guide our discussion this morning, to ask the retirement board to reduce the rate of growth to 5% with an end date of 2033, with the possibility of extending COLA by another 2 years between now and 2033. Now it's time to begin getting our questions answered. I'd like to start off by asking for clarification from Kathy Riley, I'm hoping. What does this COLA really mean to our retirees? Is it just $30 a year, $2.50 a month, or is it $17,000 over 20 years? This is the first thing we really need to understand. What is the real impact for our retirees, and what is the real impact on our city's budget? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, President Albright. And so we have a motion from you on the table. We also have a question, which I agree is a key question, because we've had some really different explanations given to us about what the COLA really means. So Ms. Riley, if I could turn it over to you to answer that, please. And then I see we've got some other hands right after. Go ahead.
Sure. And yeah, I get into the question on what the COLA means. I think what's being lost here is the fact that the COLA compounds. So when you look at it, you say that first increase, where you're increasing the base by $1,000, increases somebody's benefit by $30 a year or $2.50 a month. That's the first year. But the second year, we're going to add on top of that. And I think it would be easier to explain it. It's gotten a little complicated and a little murky because you're changing the base for the first 3 years. But just imagine if you were jumping right to $15,000, you'd be increasing somebody's benefit $90 a year. But in year 2, it's $180. In year 3, it's $170. In year 4, $270. In year 4, it's $360. And if you add all that up, that's where you get the $17,000 that Maureen talked about over a 20-year period. And some retirees collect benefits for longer than a 20-year period. Some collect less. But it's the compounding, and it's first, the compounding, most importantly, and its second is at that third increase, the increase is $90 a year, not $30 a year. Does that answer the
could I ju-
question?
It does, although I'm still not, for one thing, in the past, I think at least some of us received some misinformation about whether it compounded. So now we know it does compound. But I'm curious in understanding the math of the compounding just a little bit further. So why does it compound at exactly that same interval of 90, then another 90, then another 90, then another 90, as opposed to 90 times the
Yep.
3% or
Yeah,
whatever the COLA base, whatever the COLA is at that time?
because the base is fixed at an amount that's for most retirees, not all. For most retirees, that base of whether it's 12 or 15 is less than their retirement allowance. So that isn't changing. If the COLA were 3% on your total retirement allowance, then yes, the dollar amount would get larger each year. But it's 3% on that fixed base of ultimately $15,000. So the COLA is capped, the annual increase is capped at $450 a year, 3% of 15,000.
Okay, I'm going to let others ask more questions as we go on about that. I'm going to start going in order of the hands that are up. If we get particularly topical, please understand that if I go out of order for any reason, it's in trying to make sure we're understanding each topic in detail rather than jumping around. But I'm going to attempt to go in order first. Councillor Gentile, then Kalis, then Laredo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
On the last issue that we were just discussing, the compounding, I did send out an email to the council yesterday, and believe it's been uploaded to the city's website, stating that I was originally under the impression that the benefit was 30, 60, and 90. As I mentioned, I was continuing to try and get my facts checked. And I did the information that I sent out yesterday, which is exactly what you heard today. That came from Kathy. So you all got an email to that effect yesterday. I want to correct Tom on one issue that he mentioned back in, it's not real important, but I just think it needs to be accurately reported. Back in 2018, the issue of raising the COLA by the $1,000, it came to finance. It was reported out. The denial was reported out to the full council, and the full council voted 23 in favor, no opposed, and 1 abstention. As you all know, anything that comes to us has to get reported to the full council. And the reason for it is the $1,000 was going to cost the city $8.365 million at that time. And all of us felt that, it was only $30 because it was 1 year, that the $2.50 wasn't the most important thing. One item I want to address, and then I just have one question, and I'll let, so other people can speak. I keep hearing about how many systems there are, and that Newton has not increased their COLA base above $12,000. I mean, that is accurate, but it implies that somehow we have not been fair to our retirees. And what I want to point out to people is, as far as I'm concerned, retiree benefits are twofold, composed of there's 2 things that make up their benefits. Number one is their actual retirement check, which is a combination of how many years of service in their 3 years, 3 highest years, But secondly, and extremely important to a lot of retirees, especially as you get older, is the healthcare benefits. And I would argue that we are very generous in that regard. And the reason why I have never supported increasing the COLA base, it isn't because I wanted to be mean to our retirees, of which nobody has more close friends and family members in the system than I do. But it's because I've always been concerned that we at least maintain, if not better, the healthcare benefits that our retirees get. And just to give you an example, most of our retirees, the split is 80-20. There are many communities that are on that list that have raised the COLA that are either at 75-25 or 70-30, and there's some that can even be at 50-50. And that can make a huge difference financially. I'm on the city's healthcare plan, and I just took a look at it myself to see what a 5% shift would mean to me personally. So if I was not receiving benefits at 80-20 and I was receiving them at 75-25, it would cost me an extra $121 a month for my health insurance. If it was 70-30, it would be double that. So I think that, I mean, the chart is obvious. I don't question the accuracy of the chart, but it doesn't, as I say, tell the whole story, because it doesn't say what those communities are giving to their retirees as far as their health insurance benefit. So to me, it was always more important to manage that. So the one question that I have is, I would have waited another year to see how the numbers evolved before I even agreed to extend 1 year.
Hi.
But I understand.
Counselor Maliki, I think you need to mute.
I'm sorry. I'll quicken up the question. I would have waited another year, but I understand why folks believe that we should extend the schedule no matter what we do with COLA 1 year, because we lost 10.7% in the system last year. But what I'm a little bit confused by is I thought that we were already very much headed in the direction of having to do that, which would have extended the current schedule, which expires in 2030 to 2031. And what I'm a little bit confused by is I heard Maureen say earlier that we can increase the COLA, make the commitment for the 3 years, reduce the funding from 9.6 to 6.6, I believe it is, and that the system will be fully funded in August of 2031. I don't see how that works, and maybe I missed something, but hopefully Maureen can explain. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, CFO Lemieux, why don't you answer, and then over to Counselor Kalis.
Thank you. And very quickly, it actually is fiscal 32, Councilor Gentile, but we always make the entire payment in August of any given fiscal year. So it will be August of 31 that we actually put the funds into the account. Technically, it is fiscal 32. So that's what the additional year was that we went to the retirement board with a request of, was just to add 1 more year. We had to move to 2031. Our request was to move to fiscal 32, but the payment will be made in August of 31.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Kalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you, Ms. Lemieux and Mr. Lopez. I think the way that you all framed it was very good and clarified a lot of what's going on here. Although the word that Ms. Riley used, murky, is kind of where I'm landing, and partly because there was no mention, Ms. Lemieux, in your synopsis of the Medicare Part B and the net effect of removing that aspect of coverage for our retirees versus the COLA. As I understand it, you remove Medicare Part B, but you increase the COLA, they're still losing. And I guess, you know, the question I have is for Mr. Lopez. I don't know if the retirement board knew about the Medicare Part B prior to them voting on the COLA. I want to get his answer there, but in a larger sense, I think what President Albright talked about, she had her own proposal. I don't know the numbers to that proposal, but I do think any decision needs to probably go through again with the mayor, the leadership of the city council, and retirement board, because it just seems very convoluted what's gone on in terms of the Medicare Part B and its relationship to the COLA. So let me first ask Mr. Lopez, did you know about the Medicare Part B when you guys voted on COLA?
No, we were unaware of it. And actually, the day they had announced it, I was at the City of Newton Retirees Association down at the 440. They meet the third Thursday. So I was down there and the issue had come up, and I had informed the retirees then that I said, at this point in time, no one has said anything to the retirement board. Health insurance is not under the purview of the retirement board, but I had not heard anything. I said, and I even reflected on the school committee video that I had seen with the mayor and school committee member Bresky having a discussion about this and the mayor's response. And I had told the retirees, I said they should look at the video and see the response. So when the announcement was made, you can imagine my surprise as to that part being eliminated. So
Okay,
no,
great.
the retirement board was not aware.
Thank you. Because to me, that just it's surprising. I wasn't in any of these rooms, so I don't know the details. Maybe Ms. Lemieux was or somebody else was, but it just seems like that was a surprise thrown in, and it does relate to the funding that our retirees get, whether it's COLA or Medicare Part B, and it kind of makes everything murky. And I think we need to consider it and understand how that came to be, and if there's an alternative way. In talking about this, maybe the Medicare Part B is something that has to change, but maybe it's just certain groups of retirees at first. Maybe it's a phase out, but I just think more discussions between those three groups need to happen, because right now there's something that's not right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me go to Ms. Lemieux, and then I just want to ask a clarifying question after that. I see our next hands after that. We have Councilors Laredo, Crossley, and Danberg. Ms. Lemieux, to you first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I will say is we did not know that we were going to be making any changes to Medicare Part B. When we came forward to the retirement board, we had a lot of things happening concurrently. We had begun last August, with an RFP to go out to get a consultant to help us bid out our health insurance. When we finally got those results and started putting the rate structure together, which we went to our insurance advisory committee, which is made up of all of the leaders of our unions. Actually, on March 28th, it was the same day that we had been in front of the retirement board, presenting what we got back for proposals. They voted unanimously for us to move to Blue Cross Blue Shield. We ended up agreeing with that movement. When we did that, so this has all happened in real time. We did not know until April what the rates would be. First, we worked on the retiree rates and then the active rates. The retiree rates are going to decrease by $53 a month. That's the retiree contribution. is going to decrease by $53 a month. So each, from what it would have been in 24 with our current plan. And so each retiree is going to save $636 per year on the premiums that they actually have to pay on their contribution rate that they're paying to the city. In addition to that, all of their doctor visits are now going to be a zero copay, where they have been $10 in the past. And so in the different letters that we tried to put together, we said, if an average retiree sees a doctor 7 times per year, I truly believe for probably most of our retirees, it's more than 7 times, but I don't want to overestimate that number. So I thought, let's say it's 7 times a year. That's another $70 that they will save. So on average, we expect that each retiree will save $700 a year based on the changes that we have made to health insurance. That is why we decided if ever there was a time, the Medicare Part B is really paying for an incentive that has been gone for 14 years. In 2009, the then Board of Aldermen adopted the statute that requires all of our Medicare eligible retirees to go to Medicare. And since that time, we've still been paying the Medicare Part B incentive. Budgets are certainly tough. We were trying to make structural changes where we could, but have never moved toward adjusting that Medicare Part B until now, when we know that we're going to be able to save people $700 a year. So that people will receive their full amount this June, they'll receive half of it next year, and it's really June of 25 in which it will be phased out. And the reason I didn't mention it in my comments is because although it's all happening at the same time, it's the Medicare Part B is really related to what we did with health insurance as opposed to the COLA and the extension of the pension funding. So I hope that helps clarify things.
That was really helpful. I wonder how Mr. Lopez would respond to that, positively or negatively, but I think either way, that really helps clarify. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lopez, do you want a minute to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll just respond briefly. I believe that all the councilors got a letter that myself and the other elected member, Kelly Byrne, had written to the mayor immediately following the announcement of the elimination of Part B. And again, I want to make it very clear, as the chair, as the retirement board, we have no say in health insurance. It's not under our purview. So I want to be very clear. But as an advocate for our retirees, and as I said in it, and I used some strong language, this savings and everything else is a smokescreen. We all know premiums go up every year. We all know what the rate of inflation is. We all know that the economy is slowing, and we're all on the doorstep of a recession. And our most vulnerable employees, our most vulnerable population is going to suffer. They're going to lose money. That's it. They've got a loss. COLA or no COLA, it's a loss. That's it. That's the position that we take. The unilateral decision to eliminate that Part B is a loss to our retirees. And we're talking about people that $30,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, not hundreds of thousands of dollar pensions. You're talking about taking 1,000 to as much as 2,000, close to rough numbers, depending on if you have 1 or 2 people getting it, away from them. You're taking it. That was something that they've already gotten, something that they were promised. It's all part of a promise that when they give decades of service to this community, and they know that that's what they're told that they're going to get, I'm sorry, that's a loss. It's plain and simple. It's a loss. That's my position. Kelly Byrne and the other elected member, we wrote a letter to the mayor. You've received a letter, a copy of that letter. That's where we stand on the COLA B.
Thank you. Councilor Grossman, one last thing.
Thank you.
It just reinforces what I said earlier. I do think leadership of the council, retirement board, and the mayor need to get together and talk this through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask a clarifying question to Ms. Riley. The reason that I'm asking is in the attempt of putting different numbers together in my mind. Back in 2018, when the council had before us the request to increase the COLA base by $1,000. At the time, and then looking back at the report, we were thinking of it as $2.50 a month in the pocket of a retiree, period. Was it the case back then that it would have amounted to $17,000 over 20 years? I mean, essentially, did we have did I at least, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but as I read the report, it reads what I'm saying. Did I have a misunderstanding back then of what the value of a COLA base increase would have been? Because again, at that time, we were talking about a cost to the city, depending on how you use the word cost, of over $8 million.
Right. So it would have compounded the same way I described previously. You know, I'm going to use the annual numbers as opposed to the monthly. The $30 a year would have been $60 after 2 years, $90 after 3 years. It wouldn't have been $17,000 because you were only considering one increase as opposed to the 3 increases that you're looking at now. So the
$17,000 number reflects the value over 20 years of the 3 increases, not 1 increase.
correct.
Okay. But suffice to say that we were talking about something that amounted to more over time than $2.50 a month. That's essentially what I'm
Correct.
trying to understand. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Laredo, then Crossley, then Danberg.
So thank you, Chair Grossman. I want to first follow up on your question, Chair Grossman, to Ms. Riley. I'm not following the compounding effect that you've described. Perhaps that's because I was a history major, not a math or statistics major. So I won't profess lack of ignorance. How's that? But let's try to understand it in layperson's terms, at least for me. So year one, there's a $30 increase to each of our retirees, correct? All right, Ms. Riley, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, year two, there's a total of $60 increase to our retirees, plus some small compounding from the $30, correct?
Well, there's their benefit is already $30 higher, and it goes up another $60 higher. So now it's $90 higher than it would have been.
Why is it going up another? Is it going up another $60 because you have increased? You've increased it from year one. You've built that increase in, and then you go to year two.
Yes.
All right. So year one, you get $30 you weren't planning on getting. Year two, you get another $30 you weren't planning on getting, plus the $30 from the previous year.
Yeah. Let me try this.
Please,
Let's say
because I'm
somebody's
just trying to follow this.
No, I understand it, and it's sometimes it's easier to look at to actually see how it works out. If somebody has a $20,000 pension, right? The first year they're going to get a $30 increase. They're going to get $20,000. Well, $30. Yeah, a $30 increase, $20,300, $20,030. The next year, when you calculate it, the benefit is going to increase by $60, but now you're adding that $60 onto $20,030, so now it's $20,090.
Okay.
You know, so, the next year you calculate it, but now the base has gone up another $1,000. So now the increase is $90. It's $90 more on top of the $90 you've already increased the benefit by. That's
So
what we mean by
you're
COLA.
at $180, right?
After 3 years, yes.
Okay, so year four, you're adding what? Another
Now you're adding it. Now every year thereafter you're adding 90. So it's 180. Then you're adding 90. You're getting 270. Then you're adding 90, and you're getting 360.
Right.
Then you're adding 90, and you're getting 450. And if you add up all those numbers we just talked about for 20 years, that's how you get to the 17,000.
So year 20, for example, you're getting $1,000 more than you would have gotten in the base year, or something like that, or maybe
Something like that, yeah.
All right, so we're not, of course, doing any discount for present value of money, are we?
Not in that analysis, no.
Okay, and that over 20 years would be a fairly significant amount.
Yes.
Okay, So I appreciate that. That's helpful. I want to associate myself with the comment that Councilor Gentile made earlier about compensation for retirees being a global concept. It's not, in my mind, and it's how I think about compensation when I deal with it in my professional life. It's not just wages, but it's all the other benefits that you provide to your employees collectively. That's your compensation. We may not see that, all of us may not see the benefit portion in our paychecks. We usually don't, but it's real. And if you're an employer and the city's an employer, it is fungible money. So I guess I'm concerned about the way that we approach the retiree cut that Ms. Lemieux described. And I have to just add that the savings, Ms. Lemieux, you described are only in place for the length of the contract, right?
So
They
that's a
could
a
change.
question for Ms. Lemieux about the healthcare contract.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, but there are structural changes to what we are doing with how we are providing Medicare coverage.
Well, wait a minute. You're describing the healthcare savings that people would receive next year under the proposal, right?
Correct.
Do you know what the savings are going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now?
I would expect that the rates that the retirees are paying will increase by something that would have been comparable to if we had continued with our current plan, both whether it was as we are now or with Blue Cross. Those plans will increase by medical trend rates. So the delta is going to stay the same. And actually, I would expect it to grow a bit.
So
it will become higher.
So I just want to be clear for all of us, the change that you described, the savings that you've identified as a savings for next year, that's it. We don't know what it's going to be in 2, 3, 4 years, but your proposal to cut the Medicaid reimbursement is permanent.
Yes.
Okay. So again, I think Councilor Kalis made a very wise comment just earlier that we need to have a far better understanding of all this. And I'm going to listen very carefully. But again, I think we collectively need to look at the compensation piece as, even though it comes from different buckets, as one number, essentially. And I also am concerned about, I'm less concerned about deferring the date of the fully funding of the pensions by another year or so, if that gives significant relief to all of our residents over the next 6, 7, 8 years, because this problem that we're facing now, even if it's reduced to 6.5%, that number is going to be very significant as we move out 3, 4, 5 years from now. And I think that should be cause for concern. I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much, Chair Grossman. I'm eager to hear what others have to say.
Thank you. I just want to check in with Mr. Bresky for a minute. Mr. Bresky, is this a math or kind of clarifying question around our numbers? I want to give you the opportunity to pipe in if so.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Grossman. I had just clarifying questions for Ms. Riley. When Environment Board, you had a chart talking about the full funding year and the rate of increase that would be required. And in that chart, you had 2031, the rate of increase required was 8.6%. I took everything you were talking about that day as fiscal years. So should I read that chart as calendar years, not fiscal years? Because if it was No,
no,
okay, that's
we-
calendar years.
I've been consistently using fiscal years so that we're not flipping back and forth.
Okay, so in your chart then, you're saying it would be an 8.6% rate of growth for fiscal 31 full funding. So that would be the year ending June 30th, 2031. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. So that's in contrast to what Ms. Lemieux said is in an August 31, which would be fiscal 32.
well, I think you're looking at the second page of the memo, and
Yes.
I think what the retirement board settled on was that second line.
Right, but okay, yes, sorry, you're correct. So and to that point, when we think about the full funding date and when that occurs, it's effectively always going to occur in August, correct? Because you're putting the city's putting in one lump sum, 6, 7, 8% of the value of the assets in the trust on one day of the year. So whenever we talk about a fiscal year of funding, we're really always in under any reasonable circumstances, probably talking about it happening August 1st of that fiscal year. In other words, the first month of the fiscal year. Is that a fair assumption?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And then just one last question. Just one thing that I think might help on the compounding, just as I come to understand this. We're increasing, if we think about the rate of growth for a retiree in their COLAs, we're increasing it as a fixed amount a year. We're not multiplying by a fixed rate of growth. So in other words, we're going to say it's going to be $30 a year in a simple $1,000 COLA. It's going to be $30 a year and $30 the next year and $30 a year after. But the denominator on which that growth is occurring is going to get bigger every year because you're adding up. It's cumulative more than compounding, I guess I would say. So it's increasing, but the rate of growth at which it's increasing is a slower and slower rate of growth because you have a constant numerator and a denominator that's growing. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct.
Okay, I just thought that might help a few folks in thinking about it. And then finally, in your going back to your April 6th memo, you characterized each $1,000 in COLA base increases the unfunded liability by 3.8 million. So I just wanted to clarify the concept of the unfunded liability. I took that to mean the present value in today's dollars of all those COLA-based increases throughout time. So you have your universe of retirees who are going to receive this incremental $30 a year, then $60 a year, then $90 a year, going out through as long as they receive those benefits. And we discount them all back. And I'm presuming you're using the 6.9% rate of return as your discount rate. And when we discount that entire universe of cash flows back to today's dollars, that's the 3.8 million. Am I correct in that?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. So the value, the value in dollars today of adding a $1,000 COLA increase is 3.8 million. But the value in today's dollars of adding that third COLA increase 3 years from now is less than 3.8 million. It's 3.8 million on the day you implement it 3 years from now, but in today's dollars, it's less because we have to discount that back to today. Correct?
But you have a different population.
You do. So it may not be exactly the same 3.8.
Right.
But in a all else equal, holding the population constant, it would be 3.8, and then that would be discounted back to today. Correct?
Yes, but it would start a year later and it would be, there's a lot going on there, but yes.
Yeah. So in what President Albright was referring to in thinking about adding incremental COLAs in further out years, every year later that you add the COLA it's less of a liability in today's dollars.
If you bring it back to today's dollars, yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify those points, and I hope that was helpful for folks in thinking through it.
Could I,
Thank-
you haven't got, could I add one point on top of that? Because you did a
Sure.
really excellent job of explaining the present value of the stream of payments and getting to that $3.8 million. I think some of the other numbers that have been discussed are looking at how that, like how you pay for that $3.8 million. So, you know, as I've said to some of you on the side, as I use in presentations, that $3.8 million is the mortgage. And the funding schedule is how you pay for the mortgage. And if you have a $3.8 million mortgage and pay for it over time, those mortgage payments exceed $3.8 million. And so the numbers that have been talked about the, you know, the stepped increases in the base, and I think it's $23 million to the funding schedule, that's roughly, you know, present value is 3.8 times 3, right? The $11 million. Pay for it over time, though, and it's $22 million. So I think you just have to we have to keep in mind when we're talking that much bigger number is the pay for it over time. And actually, you're paying for it in the last year of the schedule, so it's growing with interest for all of those years.
So can I just say, follow on one thing you just said? So based on what we just talked about, the current plan or the proposed plan of adding $1,000 per year, $3.8 million per year for 3 years isn't 3.8 times 3, because as we just discussed, it's going, the value of it next year is a little less, and the value of it the year after that is a little less. So by my math, if we hold that 3.8 constant, that we're adding a $3.8 million liability this year, next year, and the year after, and we discount it back at the 6.9% rate of return, it's $9.9 million, not $11 million.
I think there's more going on. I think, you know, you have the right general concepts, but there's more going on than the actuarial valuation. And I would use the $11 million, not $9 million as the starting point, because of what goes on. You've got more people on the rolls, you've got benefits increasing. It just.
Fair enough. I was holding that 3.8 constant, but I don't have that other information that you have. So
I would hold it constant. I wouldn't discount it. I would use 3.8 times 3. My point was, now that you're talking about the impact of the unfunded liability is the $11 million, because you're not paying it right now, it's going to cost you more. And that's the $22 million.
I want to ask one clarifying question on that as well, because, you know, we're talking about this topic of the time value of money. The $22 million is $22 million to be paid in excuse me if I'm getting the year wrong, 2031, right? Those are 2031 dollars.
To be paid in August of 2031, which is fiscal 32. I just want to be
right.
I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So I'll clarify.
Right, and I'm putting it in calendar year terms right now because I'm trying to just wrap my head around the present value. You know, what's hard about this is comparing apples to apples, because it's an additional cash flow out in August of 2031 of $22 million. That has a different value in May 2023 dollars. That's really the only point that I'm making. And the reason that I'm making it is because in different charts that we've looked at, some of the math has just added up differences in cash flows over 10-year periods of time, as though they're all as though all of those dollars are of the equivalent value, but they're not. And for anybody who's never studied present value, the concept of it is that having a dollar in your hand to spend today has a different value than what a dollar is going to be 10 years from now. So essentially there is, you know, benefit to you in having that dollar in your hand today and what you might do with it, or if you were to invest it, what it might earn between now and some future period of time. And Mr. Bresky, please correct me if I'm not explaining that well, but essentially that's what I want people to understand that we're talking about. I think those of us who have spent a lot of time on this in the last year have been talking a lot not just about that mathematical concept of present value, but what it really means in city dollars and what we might be able to do in city services because we have the benefit of not having to pay certain cash flows today, but knowing that we have to pay them in the future. Mr. Bresky, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just gonna say another way to put it in context, Councilor Grossman, would be to say, if we think about the city budget in those fully funded years of 2032, 2033, the city budget's going to be pushing $700 million at that point in time. So we have to think about, you know, those future value numbers in context of the city budget at that time, not the city budget of, you know, roughly $500 million today.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Councillor
Thank you.
Crossley has been very patient. And you were next. I saw your hand dropped off and then went back up, but I want to go
Thank
to you
you.
next, then Councillor Danberg.
So, like Councilor Laredo, I have a lot more listening to do. While I understand many of the concepts in different ways, I feel right now like I'm treading water in a sea of numbers that are moving around. And I can't imagine how much work this has been for the administration and for all of us, and for the team of counselors and Mr. Bresky who have put together perhaps an alternative. But I understand that healthcare and the retiree check, the retirement check, are two different issues, separated also by who controls each pot. But what I'm thinking about, also, as you all know, I have a teacher in my family, and so I'm hearing the chatter, is that we need more communication to not only our retirees, but our teachers and our employees who are affected by this decision over time. There's a sense out there, I hear, that more, as people have said, more is being taken away than is being given. But I'm from what I'm hearing too, what I've learned so far in this meeting is that people don't have all the information, despite what's been written so far, despite the letters that have gone out from both the retirement board and the mayor. Folks don't have the information that we just shared here in the last hour understood. And I'm going to say I'm still listening so that I can make a reasonable decision. So the plan that the mayor has put forward may be the best plan of all, but I don't know that. And I am hearing that there's another way forward from our last meeting with Mr. Bresky and from the proposal that some counselors are considering already to, reduce the amount that goes into the retirement fund even a little bit further. What I don't know is if the retirement board will even consider that. And that is something I would like to hear more about, but we may not be ready to get to that point yet. I'm going to leave it there because, like I said, I have a lot more listening to do.
Thank you. Although I just want to clarify one point that you made, Councillor Crossley, and make sure I understand what you were trying to convey. So with respect to teachers, I just want to make sure that it's clear. The COLA base that we are talking about does not include our teachers because teachers have their own retirement system.
I totally understand that.
Right. So that obviously the Medicare Part B
Right.
factor does apply to teachers, and anybody clarify anything I'm saying that's incorrect. We certainly have some administrators, school principals, other folks who work in the school system who are part of the universe of retirees with respect to the COLA base, but our actual teachers are under a separate plan, state run, that this particular COLA base does not touch.
I understand, and that it's part of what I'm advocating for better communication with all of our employees, because there's a fair amount of confusion out there about, so you decide to become a teacher, you give up Social Security, you take instead a pension, you take instead whatever the health care benefits are. There's certain promises that you're given when you become a teacher. As those, I'm just using teachers, not firefighters, Tom, because but it's the same thing. I just hear from teachers. And, you know, at some point that changes, maybe for very good reasons, so that we can afford to continue to provide services and so forth. Either you give fewer people more, or you give more people less. And there's only a certain degree to which you can do that, or as people start leaving, right? So what I'm trying to say, maybe not extremely well, except I see Mr. Lopez's hand up, so maybe you should go to him, is we have to take tremendously great care with this. We all want to do the best thing for all of our employees and retirees, but our employees are already feeling hurt, our teachers in particular, by the failure of the override. The community said no to them. And now there's this. You know, I'm not casting blame on any of us. We're trying to do the best we can. I'm just wanting to slow down a little, I guess. And so I want to really understand what's the best formula going forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lopez, let me go to you, and then Counselor Danberg.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify, when you think of the school and who belongs to our system, administrators, principals, teachers, they all belong to the state system. They don't belong to the new retirement system. Just for a general rule, just think about your lower earning school staff, administrative, teacher aides. Those are the ones that are in our system. Your teachers, administrators, principals, they all belong to the state system. They're not in our system at all. Just
Oh,
wanted,
thank you. I thought principals were in your system. I appreciate you clarifying that. Okay. Counselor Danberg, then Oliver.
Thank you. And thank you, all of you that have put so much time and effort into this. And Mr. Bresky also for your explanations that have clarified some questions, certainly for me, and I know for others. I understand now much better how the 3.8 works and how you get to the $22 million. And I also appreciate the discussion on the time value of money and how it's really, in our inflationary period of time that we're in now, gets to 9.9 million, but that we should think of it in terms of 11 million because of the increase in employees, et cetera. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but okay. But if we take a step back, the most important thing, as I think somebody has mentioned, is not just the salary and what the check that the people get, but also the compensation package. And so I'm going to keep my question to just one detail that I don't understand, and that is what is the annual cost to retirees of the loss of Medicare B, and what, for example, has been the average percentage increase in the past, let's say 3 years or 5 years of that premium, and therefore I'm trying to get a handle on what the total loss is going to be, what over in 20 years or even in 10 years, where is that retiree going to be having lost Medicare B? What is that going to be costing versus what he's going to be getting back in, say, we're talking about a $700 a year if you assume that a retiree visits the doctor 7 times a year and doesn't have to pay $50 every time, or whatever that cost is. what, how can we get a handle on what the cost of the loss of Medicare B is going to be?
Ms. Lemieux, do you want to attempt to answer that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be happy to. Several years ago, we stopped increasing our contribution to Medicare Part B reimbursements. And so for years now, we have held that number constant at $925.44 a year. In year one, we will save the retirees, we are estimating $700. And they will receive $462, I think it is, and change in June of 2024. By June of 2025, they will not receive the Medicare reimbursement money at all. However, that $700 is going to increase over the years because medical trend rates, their former plan, let's say it was increasing at 5% per year, and our new plan will increase at 5% per year. That difference, the savings between the two, actually grows. So if you have a larger number increasing by 5% and a smaller number increasing by 5%, that 700 will actually grow over the years. It will take a few years for those two numbers to equal each other. 10 years from now, and that's without even adding the COLA in. I'm trying to keep those separate. If you wanted to fold the COLA in, then the retiree catches up faster. That is not my intent in even trying to explain this. As I said, we're trying to keep them separate so that we're trying to make sure that we understand what's happening with health insurance, and we're keeping pensions and COLAs in a separate bucket, if you will. But that $700 over a few years, and I haven't run it, it may be 3 or 4 years, or 5 even, before it gets to the 925, but then it will surpass the 925 in savings. That 925 has not grown for probably 5 years. So I don't know what percentage we were contributing years ago. I can tell you right now, our $925.44 is about 46.8% of the actual cost of Medicare Part B. So this is, so what we pay is it has always been it was an incentive for people to move to Medicare when they did not need to. The state, I can tell you, I think it was back in probably, I think it was around 2005 that the state eliminated the Medicare Part B reimbursement once they moved everyone to Medicare. We didn't adopt that statute until it was March of 2009, that the Board of Aldermen. So some of you were certainly on the board when you all adopted that. Since that point in time, you know, what might have been the best result would have been if we had grandfathered people in back in 2009 and then never offered it again because everybody had to move to Medicare. I don't know, but none of that happened. And for all these years, we've been paying that money. So that's more or less how that works. I hope that helped.
That does help a lot. And I think what it underscores for me here is I'm understanding little details of this as everyone speaks and explains. But I think that this is such a complicated issue that I have a lot more learning to do before I can understand and be comfortable with what the best thing to do here is. But thank you very much, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, then Councillor Downs.
Great, thank you. Chair, I'm going to kind of, my question, I actually thought that the previous two councilors were actually going to land on my specific question, but so consider this a build on the conversation from Councilors Danberg and Crossley. I similarly understand, I think, hope the pieces of the puzzle that's in front of us. What I'm about to ask for or request, I think, is well in bounds, although I don't know who could put this together. But what we are so far discussing here are several different influences on the net income to our retirees. And it varies between retirees, if I understand that correctly. What I would like to see, what I think would be perhaps the most helpful to the way I think through this, and I believe some others on this call do as well, is show us for the next X number of years, and I don't know the right time frame within which to do this, because we've heard multiple timeframes here, right? We've got this going on for 3 years, these changes going on for 10 years, this happening. If you extend this over 20 years, here's a net. That's all fine and dandy. Put them all together in one place for us, because I'm looking to understand the net up or down in net income across these different factors, so that we have an understanding of what the impact is going to be on retirees. I think that's fair. I think the pieces are all here. That would be intensely helpful for me. And on a separate note, right, separate from that ask, what I would also like to understand here, and I believe that there are multiple people here who could help answer this. What is the impact? Are we expected to vote here in the next, I don't know, hour or however long we're within this committee meeting? And what's the impact if we don't have all the information as clear in our minds as we feel we need to make what we all know is a very important vote? So 2 separate questions. The second one might be easier to answer like within the next 5 minutes. The other one is kind of contingent on how long do we have before we've got to render this vote?
Let me attempt to respond to both of those things. I think the difficulty on your first question about exactly what the impact is to a retiree is that the COLA base increase is clear. And I think Ms. Riley has clarified for us what those numbers mean. The math around what the impact of the healthcare changes is going to be in the future is directional and based on assumptions, and can't really be dialed down on a piece of paper to an exact answer for you. I think what has, and Ms. Lemieux sort of spoke to this, these things came up one in front of the other in what's, to my mind, a really difficult and perhaps unfortunate way that these topics are really working and perhaps in different directions for us to be able to understand. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think putting one set of numbers on one piece of paper about exactly what it means to a single retiree is going to be really difficult and almost dangerous. That's what I'm worried about.
And I appreciate, I completely agree. And I think that perhaps a couple other levels of detail for me might help, because I completely, and thank you for that. I definitely understand and agree with that statement. However, what we've heard so far today is that we do have an understanding. We understand some parts of each line item, if you will, like the change in healthcare does X for at least 1 year, and directionally, we understand it'll go up or down after that. We understand the change in COLA for X years. And there are going to be asterisks and double daggers and disclaimers and explanations for a lot of them. But lining them all up, I think, would be super helpful, because right now they're coming at us from different directions. And it's, I assume that I see people making notes on their own. So I assume we're all kind of, we've got our own version of a spreadsheet going kind of on the side here. So completely understood, Chair Grossman, like, couldn't agree more. But I do think, like, we've heard very specific numbers in different cases over different timeframes with varying degrees of confidence attached to them. And to me, this is an important piece of the puzzle, or this is part of a puzzle, right? Because this impact is as important as it is, needs to be balanced against perhaps even the larger, impact, which is to not only retirees, but active employees, as well as their impact on current city services, which ultimately is what we're being asked to kind of zoom out and take a look at in terms of the picture here.
Totally understood. Let me attempt something on the second part of your question, which is, what is our goal here and what are we going to do? And again, the difficulty in that is we have, the will of our group that ultimately controls that. Let me attempt to speak for myself, and I think perhaps for others who I've worked with over the past year on this topic, maybe just for myself. It certainly was not my hope to be having a feeling like we're rushing through this in the middle of our budget season. When I first came to this work, I was hoping for a longer period of time in a collaborative way with our administration and ultimately our retirement board to try to arrive at something that everybody feels good about. The way things have played out, the mayor made a proposal which was tied to very specific budget implications, clearly very specifically tied to Horace Mann, and essentially a vote before the retirement board that happened much more quickly than we were anticipating. And as a result, from the council side, we were essentially forced to move ahead much more quickly than we wanted to or had intended to. So, I feel that our hand has been forced in that way. That's not a good feeling for me. That said, that's why we felt it was so important to bring it to all of you collectively in this time frame, because the implications are huge to absolutely everything else that we do as a city. It seems pretty plain to me, and listening to the comments so far, that nobody feels ready to act and come to a conclusion today. We haven't even scratched the surface on considering the alternative that President Albright made a motion about when she first spoke. So again, it seems plain to me that a vote of that kind would not be appropriate today. Of course, if you all procedurally disagree, you'll let me know in your actions. We had talked about a second committee, the whole date of May 10th, which otherwise is held for a second night of school committee deliberations. It seems to me pretty plain that we're going to need that time. And beyond that, I don't know how much more time we may need. And just because the mayor's presented it in a certain way doesn't mean that we must act in that way, but we then have to be mindful of what reactions she and her team may have and what that may mean to different budget priorities as we work through what I expect is going to be a pretty difficult interplay of the different things happening here in our budget season. Is that helpful? Okay, let me attempt to hear from others and see how far we get. I'm also mindful, of course, that people need to go to work and go about their days, but I want to try to get as much of what is on people's minds out there in hopes that the next time we meet, we are able to be in a more concrete and perhaps confident place. So Counselor Downs, I believe you were next.
Thank you. I'm going to echo a lot of what my colleagues said about wanting a better understanding of the overall effect on our retirees of the changes that have been announced by the administration. And I've been struggling with this since the letters came out to our retirees and our current employees about the health insurance changes. And I have some more detailed questions about that I will take offline. But I also would be just helpful to have a number of things all on, and I think in charts, and I can put that together if the administration doesn't have the bandwidth to do so, but I think it would be better coming from them than from me. From my understanding, how many retirees are we talking about who make less than 400,000, or drawing down less than 400,000 from a year? How many over 60, are we at 100% of employees over 65 taking Medicare? What Medicare Part B costs? I've done a Google search that it's, at the lowest amount the Blue Cross charges, it's $1,400 a year now. So, that's at the current Medicare rate that we were reimbursing, that would be $500 and growing. But sort of where all those pieces are would be really helpful. I'm certainly not ready to vote today, and I don't think my colleagues are either. That said, we have a limited amount of things we actually control and can vote on. We aren't voting on Medicare, and we aren't voting on the health insurance, and we aren't, but I want to understand the impact on them before I go to the COLA. And I also want to know the impact of our vote and the change in reimbursements on our OPEB liability, which I understand is at $417 million. And so it's important for our own thinking to have that bigger picture in mind, I think, because that's the second and larger liability that we need to pay down. And I did look again at the Citizens Advisory, the CIG report that our mayor and Mr. Lavalbo both worked on. So let's, just to get to a bigger picture, but also a more specific picture would be really helpful for me in moving forward. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Markowitz, then Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say a couple of things. I have one question, I believe, for Ms. Riley, and I think this has been what I'm hearing from all of our colleagues here, though, is your understanding of this is deepening, and I think you're realizing just what all the trade-offs here. Bringing us back to the top of this, I think the group that's been working on this, we kind of think of this setting aside the Medicare, which is very important to the overall, how you think about the money here. We really had three proposals or three things that the docket item that was brought forward by the pension board suggested to us. The first is, we could just say no and leave it at what we do today, which implies no COLA increase and a 9.6% year over year continuation of the funding schedule increases. We could take what has essentially become the mayor's proposal and approved by the pension board, which is a 6.6% year over increase and 3 years of COLA increases, which have been explained a couple of different ways right now. We also had a third alternative, which is one that would go for something less than 6.6%. We haven't settled on an exact number, but we've talked about something in the neighborhood of 5%. Those are really the three options that I think as we go forward and talk, and clearly we need to go, there's more work to be done here. But as we go forward in some kind of collaborative negotiation to lay all this on the table, I think those are the three types of things we're going to think about. Now, with respect to each of those, and this goes to a lot of the different questions we've had about the impact on retirees and so forth, for each of those three options, you really have two affected parties. You've got the city budget, which of course we're all involved in, and you've got the impact on the retirees. Each of those options either generates more cash available to us over current operations than we have today or not. In the case of the 6.6, I think the number Ms. Riley used was 44 million. I had something like around 46, 47, but it's close enough. At 5%, you'd be freeing up about double that, say around $90 million. So that's a number for the council to consider. That is cash that would be available to do things, not just Horace Mann, but much more beyond Horace Mann. And I think that's a really important concept to grasp. The other aspect of it is, what does it do to the retirement date? In the case of, we've heard 2031, 2032, 2033 fiscal dates. All those things would be affected by which of those three options, saying there are three options, would be driven. And then finally, so you got your retirement date, you got your total cash available, and then you have, I think, the impact on the retirees just from the aspect of the COLA. And I think there may be opportunity to even add to some of the things going on in the COLA, but that would have to be a negotiation, meaning in this council, we would agree to go back and talk to the pension board and see if we can find yet another number better than 6.6%. But I think that's where we need to head. And just to put people at ease, I think that's where we'll wind up. Adding in, of course, the impact of what it is on the retirees. I have a question though, just one specific question, and then I'm done, about the total liability. And it goes to the $22 million, the future, which I believe is the future value of the COLA increases that are currently proposed. And I think it's from Ms. Riley. Does that 22 million then, if it happened today, if we all agreed to all this, we would take the unfunded, we would take the total liability, 1 billion, whatever it is, and add that $22 million to it? Is that the effect on the total liability?
No, the unfunded liability, if you do the three increases, the unfunded, the liabilities and the unfunded liabilities today increased by the 11.8.
So if we had $1 billion and we did this, we would now have $1 billion and 11 million.
In liability, yes.
Okay, so we would be taking that value. Okay, great,
Yes.
that helps. Sorry. So I'm all set, Chair. I just wanted to bring out the option thing and the fact that I think if we lay it out and we sort of say these are the impacts across the board, city budget and retirees, and I guess we'll have to factor in the Medicare part of it, because while it's not actually part of what we're voting on right now or wouldn't vote on, I think to answer people's questions is, and to support the retirement board and what they're trying to do for their membership as well. I think we'll have to do that too. But I'm all set.
Thank you. And Councilor Markowitz, you hit on something important that I want to ask Chair Lopez as you're laying out the different options. And obviously one of those options echoes what President Albright's motion was in the beginning. Chair Lopez, if this council decided that they wanted to entertain an alternative to the proposal that the mayor made that the retirement board has currently voted, would you be willing to have a special meeting to discuss that alternative should the council want to propose something back to the retirement board?
All right, so I kind of anticipated this question, and there's a lot of variables to my answer. As I tried to guide at the beginning, try to simplify this, the retirement board is going to respond accordingly to this board's action. And that's really where I want to leave it. I don't want to get into a negotiation because we get into public meeting laws with different members on the board and everything here, and I don't want to speak for every member. That being said, we'll respond accordingly to whatever this board decides to do with this docket item. And I think that's the best response I can give you at this moment. I really am concerned about getting into negotiations in this form, and then we get meeting law with the retirement board and everything else. So I'll just say this, the retirement board has always been willing to work within timeframes that they need to. Okay, and I'll just leave it at that. I think that's the best solution to answer at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Let me try one other question. Tell me if this is something you can answer. By what period of time would the retirement board have to have a vote if it were to consider changing the appropriation for this coming fiscal year to a different number than what you have voted so far?
I believe the date, believe we have up until the end of June to do it, but we have to do it. Yes, it will have to be done.
Okay,
I can get you a firm 100% date on that, but I believe we have to take action by the end of June, no later.
okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Counselor Lucas, then Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to everyone. This has been a very interesting conversation. It's also been a very confusing conversation because we've heard many different ideas and opinions being shared this morning. And I probably regret my vote the other night, but I believe this conversation should be taking place in finance, not at a committee of the whole meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, now approaching 9:45, when some of us have day jobs. So I'm not sure how much longer I can stay on this meeting. I don't think we're taking a vote today, but I am not prepared to vote on anything until I see all the information laid out to us in memos, charts, presented to us in writing. And one thing I would like to see presented to the council and also to the public is a FAQ. FAQs written by GLAM, if that group is still meeting, and Mr. Bresky, the pension board, Mayor Fuller and her team, if they all want to write maybe their own FAQ, because I've heard lots and lots of different questions and different plans, and there's many moving parts, and the market could shift. It could shift this way, it could shift that way. This is very complicated stuff, and this information needs to be presented to us in a clear and concise way, and it has not been presented to us that way so far. So that is one thing that I would like to see happen before I vote on this item. And I will leave it at that, and I will continue to listen on for as long as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Wright, then Baker.
Thank you. So my question, and again, there's been a lot of numbers, and I'm glad it would have been nice to have this all in one place ahead of time. So eliminating the Medicare Part B, it sounds like 73% of the retirees do get some reimbursements, and is it $925 per person? And if they have a spouse, that's where the $1,800 is. Is that correct?
Ms. Lemieux, you want to answer that? I think that's correct, but we'll let you
That
speak
is
to whether it's
correct.
correct.
That is correct. And just to make sure it's clear, though, the $700 also applies to the spouse. So it's per person. That it's $925 reimbursement per person that we're projecting the $700 savings.
So the $700 savings, though, is it two different things? So the retirees are going to save $700 in premiums, but they're losing the $925. So they're getting a negative. So it's costing them $225, and then they're getting a COLA of $30. So $195 that they're losing this year with what we're doing.
but we would still be giving them half of the reimbursement this year. So they would still get 462. The following year, they would receive 60 for the COLA. So the
So they'll
negative
lose
would be
the
165 in the
Oh, yeah.
following year. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And just, if I can just make sure that everyone understands this, we are just putting the rates out today for all of the active employees. And I know many of you subscribe to our health insurance, as do I. Our rates are also increasing significantly. What we really need at some point in time, I don't know how we'll fit it in the calendar, is a conversation about health insurance in general. But just so you know, it's not only the retirees that are going to bear a cost. It's also the actives are going to increase. All of our insurance for anyone who takes city insurance is
That
Yeah, but-
cost.
about $2.3 million a year.
Okay. Okay, great. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Counselor Baker, then Noel.
I'm trying to get this gadget to work. Thank you, and thank you for your patience, colleagues. I guess I would say that the conversation today leads me to follow up a bit on the suggestion, I think implicit in your comments and also several of our colleagues, that we have clarity about what we're actually being asked to vote on and its implications. The president began by talking about an alternative plan of some sort. And part of the difficulty is understanding not only the financial background, but ultimately what action we're going to take so that it's clearly framed and we can make that vote when the time comes. So I would just encourage the chair to work with our colleagues to have as simple, not just the docket item, but the explanation that I think Councilor Markowitz and others have asked for, sort of the costs and benefits of that laid out as simply as possible based on the conversations we've heard today. So that's it. I hope that can go forward. And do we move to hold at some point, Madam Chair?
Well, we have a motion before us from President Albright. So I think what I see is we've got Councilor Noel and Councilor Gentile has been very patiently waiting to speak again. So I think when those comments are done, it's probably our moment to start talking about what we need to do procedurally. It seems to me getting back to some sort of a motion to hold makes sense, and then motions to hold our other three items, which are on this agenda, which we're clearly not going to get to today.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Noel and then Gentile.
Thank you. So probably feeling dovetailing on what Councilor Baker said. So I think what else would be helpful is to understand what decisions have been made, because I think the health insurance change is done, as I understand it. And what actual decisions do we have any control over? And then even if we do make even if we vote a recommendation, if it still needs to be approved by the retirement board. So I think it might be helpful to understand what's in our purview, what's not in our purview, and what is already solidified and what's in play.
Let me try to answer that quickly. Medicare Part B and that announcement was made by the mayor. We do not have any official capacity or say over it. I think what some have expressed is a view to try to make a plea or negotiation of some kind with whatever other authorities we may have to try to influence that. But this body has no vote officially on Medicare Part B. That is the mayor's purview, and she has made her announcement. So that's one. The COLA-based piece is where our authority comes into play. And as Councilor Markowitz, I think, attempted to lay out, we could opt to just approve the plan that the retirement board has already voted on, and that would be the end of this docket item and discussion. I think what President Albright's motion had indicated was to find out if this council has an appetite to make some sort of an alternative plan. And the point of making some sort of an alternative plan is to explore whether there are other ways to structure the numbers in terms of what the cash flows are that we pay to our pension appropriation and what benefits in the COLA base our retirees might be entitled to that put the city in a better position to be able to administer and afford city services over the period of time where we're trying to fund our liability, and perhaps put our retirees in a stronger position from a COLA perspective. And that is really, that's been sort of a brainstorm type of an exercise, because I think what is so hard about this is that there are infinite possibilities of how one could structure how this all goes. We have different suggestions from different groups before us of how they want to do it. But there's lots of different ways to structure the math. And I think what President Albright's motion was trying to get at is, are we satisfied with what the retirement board has already agreed to and they have felt comfortable with to date? Or do we want to try to push that a little further and see if there's more wiggle room or not? I don't think we're ready to answer that question as of this morning, but again, I think that's what she was trying to get to. Councillor Gentile, then President Albright.
Thank you. I'm going to be quick. To the question that Councilor Noel just asked, it would be my hope that the city council would work hard to get the mayor to reconsider the unilateral action to eliminate the reimbursement. As for the Med Part B reimbursement, there are 1,703 retirees that received the benefit the last year that it was given out and are due to get it this June. Of that, I don't know the breakdown between the Newton retirement system and the Massachusetts teachers retirement system, because that number is made up of people from both of those groups, okay? The 925 represents a little less than 50% of the cost of the current standard rate for Medicare Part B. It's close to $2,000. There's a second rate or a second tier, and I spoke to someone who recently retired from the city, and the cost to them is just under $4,000 a year for Medicare Part B. So the reimbursement represents about 25%. All right. All these things can be verified. You know, Steve Curley for sure has a lot of these numbers. Now, the last point I want to make is it's nice to talk about the cost of COLA being, $3.8 million. And, triple it if you want to look at the 3 years. Kathy, Ms. Riley, please, if I misspeak when I'm done, please correct anything that I have incorrectly. I sent out on Sunday a spreadsheet to you that was prepared, as I said in my memo, by Steve Curley and Kathy Riley. I also want to thank them for putting the time in to produce it. I didn't do that earlier, and I should have. Please look at the bottom line. And the bottom line will say between going to FY 2031 or going to FY 2032, the difference is over $34 million. Because that's the way we fund our pension system. Unless someone's going to come up with over $11 million and put it in the system up front, this is going to increase our unfunded liability by over $34 million. And the reason I'm not saying 22 is because what no one has been talking about is that there, in addition to the COLA increases, there is another cost for extending the schedule out another year. And my understanding is that is approximately $12 million. So that's why if you look at the additional cost at the bottom of that spreadsheet, the difference is $34 million. And I think that we really need to think hard about that, especially in light of some of the recent comments by Moody's about our unfunded liability. So I hope, though, I know you're getting a million numbers that are tossed at you, which is why I asked that that spreadsheet be prepared so you would have it in front of you and could take a look at it.
Thank you, Ms. Riley. I'm going to come to you in a second. I think, Councillor Gentile, that you're conflating two different vocabulary terms, which is the cost of the unfunded liability today versus the increased cash flows over time that we will have to pay in different years. The increased cost to the unfunded liability is a present value calculation that results in one number that would be added on to what our unfunded liability is today. The 34 million was adding up the differences in each of 10 years of, well, what would the cash flows have been under one plan in 35 versus the new plan, and then 36 in the new plan and 37 in the new plan, and doing a straight line of addition over all those periods of time, which is funky math because of, as I talked about earlier, the concept of present value, that the value of $1 in 2035 is less valuable, or it's not 2030, now I'm screwing up my years, 2025 is less valuable than 2023. But I'm going to be quiet and let Miss Riley answer. And then you can, clarify further if what we're saying isn't making sense. Ms. Riley?
Councilor Grossman, I can be educated, but I don't see where it's funky math. It's going to cost, if those two plans, if you put them side by side, the city of Newton is going to have to come up with an additional $34 million. I don't know how you can make it any simpler than that, but let's see what Ms. Riley says.
But over different periods of time is my point. We don't have to come up with $34 million today.
No, you have to come up with it you have to come up with it in the last year. Is basically, it gets pushed to the last year, but it's still $34 million.
Right. But in the last year, we can talk about that. That's another concept that I want to put a pin in. Ms. Riley, why don't you answer first?
Yeah, Councilor Grossman, I think everything you said was accurate. Letty, the only thing I'd correct is the statement that you said the unfunded liability is increasing by $34 million. That's not correct. The unfunded liability is increasing by the $11.8 million. The total payments over time, over the time period that we looked at, are increasing by the $34 million. So the unfunded liability, which is what the rating agencies look at, is going up by $11.8 million.
But is it accurate to say that it's going to cost the taxpayers $34 million if we fund the system the way we traditionally do?
Over time, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, if that's the apples to apples analysis that you want to do, yes.
Well,
And
I'm a simple person.
well, but keep in mind that mortgage analogy, if you've got a $500,000 mortgage, you talk about a $500,000 mortgage, you don't talk about the $2 million in payments that it takes you because you pay that mortgage down over 30 years. So let's just, from an actuarial perspective, you're not adding $34 million to unfunded liability. That's a lot of money. The 11.8 is what you're adding. So I'll stop there.
Mr. Bresky, can I give you 2 minutes before I know you need to go to your meeting to comment on this particular topic and what the 34 million means, what the unfunded liability means, and if you have an extra 30 seconds, how this plays into when we start funding OPEB, because I just want to make sure we're getting at that concept of what these cash flows mean to our residents and their city services offered to them in their lives.
Sure, I can only talk for a minute because I do have to get on a 10 o'clock call for work. Kathy Riley kind of alluded to this earlier, but the way we fund the liability doesn't change the liability. The liability is all the benefits we're paying to our retirees over time and then discounting that back into today's dollars. How we fund that is, it's totally independent of how we fund that. So you can't say it costs, I kind of object to the terms costs or savings. It's not costs or savings. It's the liability is what it is. Higher COLA will increase the liability. Whether we choose to fund that today or whether we choose to fund that in the future isn't affecting the value of the liability. So that's point number one. And then point number two, if in terms of OPEB, is if I'm not sure if we're referring to, but the city's plan is to say, okay, we're going to put $50 million into OPEB until that's fully funded on the back end of pension, and that's going to be sometime in the 2040s. The incremental cash flow, the cost, if you will, comes at the tail end of all of that. So again, when you think about the incremental dollars we're going to pay out under any of these scenarios, is the last year of full funding of this whole thing that happens 20 years from now. So if you're saying, oh, well, that's going to be, the cost of that is going to be, $60 million, $100 million, whatever that number is, that's, again, you're talking about a budget that's going to be like $1 billion for the city at that point in time. So you have to think about it in context of $1 billion budget, not a $500 million budget.
I know you need to go to your meeting. Let's stop there. We can pick up this thread the next time we talk about this. Thank you. President Albright, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to recommend that we discuss, we table my motion, which I believe can be carried over to another meeting, and someone who knows Robert's rules can confirm that. And I would like to recommend that we hold all the docket items that are before us until that next meeting. And in addition, I would love for Ms. Riley to help us work out the numbers for the proposal that was the motion that was made tonight by a next meeting, whenever that might be. If you're willing and if you have time, I don't know if you do, Ms. Riley. And I would also like to recommend that we have a meeting with the mayor in the interim to discuss the Medicare Part B as requested by many of our colleagues. So I guess first is the tabling of my motion until the next meeting. Is that, Ms. Moore, is that, I understand that that's allowed to be carried over for one meeting.
The next session, yes, it would have to be the next meeting. Mhm.
So
does that require a vote, or can she just table her own motion?
Oh, now you're getting tricky. If in doubt, I always get a vote. If
I'll
there's-
make them.
All right.
Or you could.
I'll make,
withdraw.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion on tabling President Albright's motion to the next meeting? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and then President Albright moved to hold the remaining items on our agenda. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion on holding each of the items, each of the 4 items before us on our agenda today? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Do you need a second for that, or did you already have it? Okay.
No, it's okay. We're in committee. We don't need seconds for that. Okay. I think we need a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? So we've held these. Wait, quick thing, President Albright. We do adjourn as opposed to what's the motion we do for committee of the whole in our budget process? I just want to make sure that we're fine in our next meeting.
In our budget process, we hold the meeting open.
You recess, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So should I instead, should I reconsider that and make it a motion for recess?
You can, this is a committee of the whole. I think you can adjourn. We'll.
This committee.
We can.
Yeah, I don't think we need to have a recess. I think we can adjourn this one.
Okay. All right. And then just call our next meeting for most likely May 10th, right? Okay. All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aye.